Good morning and welcome to the Point. It is Monday, August 30th, 2021. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channel 7, 11 and 20. Good morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9 and the folks joining us on Party Grenada and Go to Fet Facebook pages. It is the very first to the point of this week, and this week we're starting off with a topical issue. I have joining me virtually is the Public Relations Officer of the Public Workers Union, Daisy Hazzard. Good morning, Miss Hazzard, and how art thou? How was the weekend?
Good morning, Blossom, and good morning to your listeners and viewers all across Grenada, Carriacou, Petit Martinique, and the diaspora. It's wonderful to be here with you, to be kicking off the week with GBN to the point. And it was a fantastic weekend, a little bit of rain, but a very fantastic weekend.
Nice. Good to know. So, Ms. Hazzard, here's how we're going to start. It is the 30th of August, and as far as I am aware, public officers usually get their pay on the last Friday of each month. It was promised that public officers will begin to see the reflection of their 4% salary increase as of the end of August. So the question is, are public officers seeing the 4% salary increase as promised?
Okay, so Blossom, it's a good note to start the morning. It's a good note to start the week. And we are indeed pleased to say that public officers all across the Tri-Island state would have received their 4% increases last week. Most persons would have seen that reflection in their paycheck on or before Friday. We know that the government generally tend to pay on time, and they also did so this time, and so persons would have seen that. And we are very happy and heartened that the 4% increases, which were due January, end of January this year, has finally been paid up and will continue to be reflected in salaries going forward. Because as you know, we've had 7 long months of struggle. 7 long months of having to be crying out to the public, of having to be appealing to government to say, pay the 4% increases. And that has finally been done. So it's a bit of a relief. And we really want to thank the government for making good on that promise to finally pay at the end of August 2021. And that has been done. So our public servants certainly had a very good weekend. But even as we say thank you, and even as we welcome the news of the 4% increases, there is still an unfortunate twist to this story. And so the 4% saga is not totally put to bed. In fact, there are 2 components of it that are still not at rest. One is the fact that the outstanding and retroactive payment of 7 months, January to July, that is still not resolved. As you and the public would know, government indicated that they cannot pay that. It's $8.4 million cumulatively that's owed to all public sector workers in Grenada for the course of 7 months, $8.4 million. In the grand scheme of things in Grenada, we know that $8.4 million is a mere drop in the bucket. It's a trifling amount compared to government's sort of a spending habits. And government has indicated that they are desirous of paying that amount in bonds. And all public sector workers, each and every single union has indicated to government an unwillingness to accept bonds. In fact, we had a general meeting with our members last week. And to a man, with the exception of one person, I think, or just a few persons said, let's take the bonds. Every single person said, I do not wish to receive bonds from the government. I would like to receive my cash payment right now. And they gave a number of reasons, which we're not going to go into this morning because there are so many other things to talk about. We also know that government indicated that unions perhaps should try to seek a buyer for bonds. And as we said to government, we do not have bonds. And so therefore, we have nothing to sell. So we cannot approach any bank, any financial institution to ask them to accept bonds because we don't have bonds. If government wants to float some bonds and get an institution to purchase them, so be it. That's fine. But we're not. This is not under our purview to go out and find a buyer. And so that's the second part of the story that is yet to be resolved. We are very pellucid about it. We are going to continue to stick up for that money that's owing for our workers. And we really hope that can be done quickly. without a lot of acrimony and without us having to be out there on the street protesting. And so we've had a lot of that for this year. And God willing, we'd like to see the rest of the year walk out without that sort of those sort of actions. The second unfortunate bit is that many of our workers have not received the 4% increases. And I want to stick that point again. Many workers who should rightfully receive the 4% increases have not received those increases. And I want to go back to 2017. This practice by government of paying some public servants and not paying some public servants increases that are bargained for by the union started in 2017. And what we had happening is that some persons received increases in their paychecks in 2017, and then the following year, 2018, did not receive it. Some persons, again, even had to pay monies back. And up to now, government has not been able to provide to the unions and to workers a rationale as to why some workers are denied increases that are bargained for by the union. And let's be mindful, there is no other structure in place to provide these workers systematic pay increases. And it is agreed. I mean, this is just a worldwide practice that is driven by financial measures and so, that as we live, there is inflation, there is rising costs of living, and every number of years or every year or so, an employer has to ensure that even if it's just to cover inflationary increases, employees ought to get some sort of an increase in pay. And so there's a class of workers within the public service that government has decided you are just going to slave and you are just going to labor, and we are not going to increase your salaries at all. Or we'll do so if and when we feel to, when somebody feels sorry for you. And that's not good enough. What we saw happening last Friday, and we are still getting those reports this morning, we have workers who received the 4% increase in 2020, that's last year, and should rightfully receive it this year. They have been receiving it. So they were not even disenfranchised in 2017, 2018. They've been receiving increases all along. And for some reason, today, this morning, these persons would have woken up with the knowledge and have been saddened by the fact that where other public servants who they are working alongside every day have received their 4% increases, they have not received it. We also heard cases of pensioners not receiving the increases. And as we all know, once increases are agreed upon, government ministers receive increases as well. So they should have seen increases reflected on their paycheck. And also pensioners should also receive increases. That's the only measure by which a pensioner can receive an increase. And our pensioners are also telling us that they have not received it. So there's a lot of questions that we have to ask this government. We have been knocking on doors since last week because many of our senior administrators have reached out to the union. Many workers have reached out to the union and said, based on the letter that was sent regarding the 4% increases, we are fearful that we will not receive our monies. And some persons indicated to us that from our department, my department, it is so heart-wrenching to be able to say that there are workers who I have no answers for. I don't know what to say to them. I don't know how to face them. And I'm literally paraphrasing what would have been said to me by a senior administrator. I don't know how to face these workers. How do I say to them that you are in this ministry laboring day after day, year after year, and you will not receive 4% increase? Because the letter that was sent on instruction by the GNT excluded you. Workers who hold open-ended contracts were excluded. And I want the public to understand that we have, and sometimes when I call these numbers and I say these years, I think it's too much for people to grasp, that we have workers who have been working with government for 20 odd years and 19 years and 16 years and 11 years and 10 years who hold open-ended letters from a PS that just says, you've been appointed, well, not appointed, where you're going to work in this capacity, and it does not give you a start date or an end date. And a lot of these persons have not received increases. So how does a person who's working for 20 years and 15 years alongside somebody who might have been working, let's say 5 years, but that person has a contract that says, a letter that says you're a contract employee, but your contract has an end date. Now we have a lot of persons in this service who have contracts whose end dates have long expired. So there are workers who can show me a contract that said it expired in 2003. 17 and 3 is 20 plus 1. That's 18 years ago. Or they have a contract that said it's expired in 2008. Such a person received the increases. But a person who's working longer than them, with a letter that has no end date, didn't receive the increases. And you even have persons who have these long-standing expired contracts, did not receive it. But they're there in this service working day after day. And so these are questions that we are going to be pounding on government's door, and we want to give them the opportunity to provide the answers and to fix the wrongs, because it must be an error. Maybe it's a clerical error. Maybe it was an error in interpretation of the letter. Maybe the letter left itself to too many persons having to decide what it meant. But it must be an error that a worker who's been receiving these increases in 2021 just did not receive it. Just did not receive an increase that is due to them. And so we want to take the position as union this morning and give the government the opportunity to fix those wrongs and to ensure that those persons who should justifiably and rightly receive the increases that the unions bargained for, that they can receive it. And to this end, we have been reaching out. We are reaching out, and we started that process last week, reaching out to our CABSEC, reaching out to our PSDPA, reaching back out to the GNT to find out what is the issue. We have been also informed by some of our members that when they receive the list of names from Ministry of Finance as to who should get paid, when they look at it, a number of persons would have been left out. So in many cases, these officers would have called back to the Ministry of Finance and said, well, you left out 10 workers or you left out 15 workers. And then the ministry would have said, well, we left them out because they shouldn't receive. And those ministries and departments would have had a flurry of activity between themselves and the Ministry of Finance, sending back information to say, yes, this person has to be paid. And so we want to believe that perhaps in some instances, maybe some persons who should have been on the list were not there. We are giving the government the benefit of the doubt. We are giving the system the benefit of the doubt in the case of those workers who just did not receive this year. But for the persons who, since 2017, have not been receiving increases, it is time that the public, and it is time that workers, because we, the union, have been speaking about this. We have heard our union crying out. It is more than time that that situation is rectified. Because there is no way it can be justified that someone works year after year and cannot receive a salary increase. I received a message from a young lady who said to me, Ms. Hazzard, I've been working 8 years. And I'm trying to pull her up because I really want to be able to say it properly. I've been working 8 years with the government of Grenada. For a number of years, my salary was $800. Okay. So for a number of years, my salary, I pulled up the wrong worker. My salary was $800. And I finally received an increase. Some PS gave me $200 a couple years ago. And then another person gave me $138. So presently, her salary is $1,138. I'm quoting here. $1,138. Sorry, not 8 years, 17 years. This is a person with qualification, with education, working in a government ministry. And she started out with $800 per month. And today, 17 years later, Grenadian public, I want you to understand, 17 years means that you had a baby, and that baby has progressed through life, went to secondary school, graduated, and is probably in TAMCC. That's the length of that time that this person has been giving service to the country. And today her salary is $1,138, and she did not receive the 4% increase. So ask your government, ask your parliamentary rep to explain to you how it is a person could be laboring for Grenada in the public service for 17 years. And it is time to receive a pay increase. That person is a member of the union and did not receive 4%. Ask your government. We need to ask the government, how do you plan to pay these people increases? How can you conscionably sit and preside over a society, preside over an administration that literally enslaves people? that literally exposes people to all sorts of ills. When you have these are young mothers, these are young women, these are not children anymore. A person who has been working for 17 years, even if they started at 17 or 18, by now it's 34, 35, 40 years. We are talking about people in their late 30s to early 40s with children, with families. What are we exposing them to? When they cannot come to work and earn a decent dollar year after year, the frustration, the anxiety, the lack of motivation. And so many of these workers are workers who are exploited by the government. Some of them, and I'm going to say it here this morning because we do get the reports, some of them are sexploited throughout the society and even in the workplace because people know that they are vulnerable because they work for a pittance. And we have a labor code and we have laws in our country that tells the government how it should employ people. These are laws that have been passed by government. And Blossom, I'm preaching this morning, but I know that Grenada saw a video that went viral over the weekend with Honorable George Brizan, RIP. And may he just rest in peace, because we saw a member of parliament at the time resigned because he stood for something and he objected to something that his government wanted to do. And he said, Brizan, George Ignatius Brizan, would not be party to this. I cannot support my cabinet colleagues in trying to take away rights and privileges of workers. We saw that, and perhaps it came out at the best time when we can be reminded in Grenada of the breed and the brand of politics and politicians that our little island can produce. And so we must not tell ourselves that what we have today is the best thing that we can do, because we know our country can do better. And we are asking the men and women, the 14 of you, who sit in the seat of government to manage the affairs of this country, to do better. You are not placed in position so that you can continue a practice of exploiting workers, of discriminating of workers, of hiring workers and keeping them enforced to work in fear and domination. There is a labor code that you are the architects of, that you are the gatekeepers are at this moment, which tells us how every Grenadian ought to be employed. And what you are doing is just not good enough. And so we are, as we say again, today we are taking the approach that it is an anomaly. There are errors that has been made that has to be fixed. We will be seeking the answers and we'll take it from there as the days go by.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand. In terms of the workers that did not get the 4% salary increase, workers with open-ended contracts alone, or are there others who are quote-unquote fully employed with the government that did not receive it? Is there a specific group of people that did not receive it? Do you think politics has a part to play in terms of the party you support has a part to play in if you did not receive the 4%? I just want to make sure I understand who got and who didn't.
All right, so let's be clear. We have not had any reports of any established worker. When I say established worker, any worker that is employed by the PSC, the Public Service Commission, not receiving their salaries. And we know that the Public Service Commission is one of the pillars, one of the strongest pillars of our democracy. If you open the Grenada Constitution any day, one of the first things that you are going to come across is the PSC and the role of the PSC in our society. And thank God for the Public Service Commission that we are not all employed in ways as if we are slaves. And so when a master speaks or when a master says, you just hold $800 a month, we have no recourse. But even if there is no PSC, so even if these workers are not employed with the PSC, there is a labor code. What you have had happening, Blossom, over the last 20-something years, the labor code makes provision for contract work in various forms. But what you have had happening is that a wholesale practice by this administration in repeated and successive terms of government has made it a practice to hire workers, ultra-vires the PSC, through the ministries, through PSCs, through administrators, under contract. But even when we look at the contracts that our workers are given, we know that it contravenes the labor code. And I want to stick on our mind section 29.5. And that's a watchword. We are coming out of 4% as a watchword on the lips of every Grenadian. And as a union, we want to put section 29.5. Be able to say that your labor code Section 29.5 lays out very clearly contracts of employment. That's part 5. Contracts of employment. And it speaks to different ways that persons can be employed under contract. And so there is room for contract, but not in the way that government has been practicing it. No worker should be working continuously in the same job, doing the same duties, the same description for beyond 2 years without being made a permanent worker. And the way that a worker can be made permanent is through the PSC. But even if that is not happening at the moment, again, we're still asking, why would a government be employing Grenadian young people, knowing full well that you are taking advantage of them and discriminating against them in the ways that you employ them, and not even giving them decent salary increases when the union bargains for it? So what we have is that it's very hard to tell Blossom who didn't get paid because the reports are just coming into us. But what we know for sure, it is contract workers of various forms. Some of them with open-ended letters, some of them with no letters, because we do have people who are working in service for donkey years, ready to go home with no letters. These persons have not, a lot of them also have not received pay. So as this week progresses, we are going to be able to collate that information a bit more and get a clearer picture. But what we know is it's our contract workers. Shamefully, it's our contract workers who do the same jobs as permanent and established workers. Yes.
While we speak of public officers, I also want to bring up the reports of at least one employee at the ministerial complex being among COVID-19, current positive COVID-19 cases. And considering the environment that the ministerial complex is in terms of how people interact with each other and the amount of people in the complex, what are the reports the PWU has gotten with regards to people who are maybe in isolation, positive cases? How is the PWU working along with its members to ensure everyone stays safe and COVID-19 free?
All right. So thank you for that question, Blossom. We too have seen the reports of persons of an infected case at the ministerial complex. And it is a bit unfortunate that from the union's position, I have to say we have seen it, because we should not have seen it in the public along with the public. Every public sector worker has a union that represents them, and we represent the workers at the complex. And so one would have thought that the Ministry of Health would have thought it prudent to inform the union that there is such a case. Because when our members panic, when our members become fearful, when our members have questions, really they come to the union. There is a culture of fear, and we say it again because it's true. There is a culture of fear that pervades the public service in Grenada right now. And I'm talking about not policemen and teachers and so. I'm talking about the public service that is represented by the Grenada Public Workers Union. There is a culture of fear among workers, and a lot of that goes back to contract work, to workers who know that I have no tenure. And even if I've been laboring for 20 years or 15 years or 17 years, someone can just tell me today, go home, because they don't like the way that I look at them. And we've had instances of that in the last 2-3 weeks. We've had at least 2 or 3 instances of that, where somebody just kind of says something that somebody don't like, an administrator don't like. And rather than saying to that very good worker, let's have a conversation, because again, your labor code points out to you, spells out to you how you discipline workers, especially based on the infraction that they may have committed. But what you have in the case of contract workers, there's no procedure for them. Is that somebody can just tell them, go home. I'm not signing your contract again, although they've been working for all these years without renewed contracts. So to come back to the case of the COVID-19 person, we're aware of it. And fortuitously, we have been speaking with our members about the COVID-19 situation. We have written formally to our members, even before we knew that there was a case, advising them to follow the protocols, to maintain social distancing, to take care of their safety at work, and where they have concerns, to go forward to their PSs and administrators, and also to let the union know. The case of the complex is a very troubling one, because we have many spots throughout that complex where the air conditioning does not work. In fact, just last week, we had reports from the Ministry of Agriculture. And I'm saying it here, although we have not had an opportunity to go to that ministry as yet, which we will be doing. Workers came to us and said, look, I feel that I'm being discriminated against because the AC does not work. The place is stuffy. We're coming down with respiratory problems. There is COVID in the air. And some workers seem to have the privilege to go home early or to not report. But there's another section of workers that are made to endure these conditions from 8 to 4. And that's just one ministry. And so you have other spots throughout that complex where the AC just does not work. If you walk into that building and you go into those pockets immediately, if you have a sensitive nose like mine, it will begin to twitch, your eyes will start running, your throat will start tightening up. And so we know that those conditions exist. What we're asking our workers to do, as the Ministry of Health has been asking, be vigilant, be on your guard. The person that can best take care of your health is yourself. If you feel that you have issues, the Labor Code also provides for you the opportunity to be able to remove yourself from any work situation that challenges your health or challenges your safety. But there is a manner in which it must be done. And we here at the union, we are here ready to stand with you and to guide you in that process. We have also reached out to Ministry of Health. We have reached out to the CABSEC. We have reached out to Minister Steele, Minister of Health, because we know that we must partner with government in making our workers comfortable as they deal with the COVID situation. And let us be mindful, Blossom, that in addition to the case or two that we might hear about, we also had other areas in government last week where some places had to be shut a little bit. The public might not have been aware of it, but we've had instances like that because there might have been some little scare or something like that. And again, our workers have been reaching out to us. But if we don't have information from the ministry, we cannot speak with our workers credibly to say, well, okay, this is what the ministry wants of you. Sure, we pay attention to the press releases and the conferences and so, but we are a union and we represent our workers. And we know that the authorities know that we are here. So we have reached out. We sought to have a meeting last week urgently. That did not happen. And so we are knocking on doors again. And we know that last year, during the height of the pandemic, we were able to have several meetings with Minister Steele. We had several meetings with senior administrators at the level of the Ministry of Health. And we expect no less this year. We have reached out to initiate that process, and we expect to have that process started or resumed as early as today. We would hate to have to come here in the media to have to ventilate anything at all. Because at this time, with the COVID crisis that we are facing in Grenada, we all have to pull together in a positive way to ensure that our population remains safe, to ensure that our population remains calm. And some of the reports that we are receiving from the community, from our members who are dealing directly with COVID patients, from our members who are out there doing community testing and all of that thing, we've had reports. There are members who have been coming to us. Those are not things I want to come on GBN to speak about this morning, because the role of the union is not to inflate or to incite any situation that's already hot. The role of the union as well is to partner with government, to partner with the ministry in ensuring that where we find little tricky concerns that our workers speak to us about or that comes to our attention, we can immediately bring it to your attention so that the issue can be solved if there is really an issue. We know sometimes we may receive reports that are not credible, but we have received, even as late as this weekend, we have received reports, as recent as this weekend, reports that are credible that we must bring to the attention of the Ministry of Health, directly to the Ministry of Health, and not on GBN to the point this morning. And so we are knocking on these doors, and we hope to be able to have those conversations there where we can talk about issues of health and safety, the things that concern our members, and how we ensure that we keep them safe and the population safe going forward. Because let us be mindful, Blossom, the persons who are out there directly in the front line fighting against COVID are our members, public worker union members.
You've mentioned knocking on doors. This is not the first issue you're knocking on the door with. The question is, how soon you expect those doors to open? Is it a door that's locked or just a door that's closed?
No, I don't think at all it is a door that's locked. I think in the cut and thrust of things, if we look at our numbers, we've had literally 1 year with a lot of peace and quiet. We've been talking about COVID while the world has been experiencing COVID. But we have been sort of experiencing the COVID situation vicariously. And then just after, in the middle of August, as we all know, there seemed to have been an escalation and explosion a bit, if you want to call it that, because we went from 0 cases, we went to having some cases on the border, and I think up to 29, the release put out by the ministry on the 29th, which was Saturday. Our caseload, we had 44 active new cases, which brought the caseload up to almost to 300 and something, rounded off to almost close to 375. And so definitely it is cause for concern. And so we do not anticipate that they are closed doors. They cannot be closed doors. What we know is that everybody has been busy. Even when we reached out last week to have that conversation at the level of CABSTEC and the CMO, Dr. Sean Charles, they too were huddled in meetings regarding the same COVID-19 situation. That is the information that was passed back to the union. And so we are going to keep trying. We are going to keep knocking, because we know that the onus is on us to have those conversations where we can help to better safeguard our members and, by extension, the entire nation. Because let's face it, Blossom, if our medical team, if all those persons who are out there doing all the things that they do every day, managing shelters, looking at the persons who's coming in, your customs officer, your immigration officials, your persons on the border, your teams who are going out there in the community, those are all workers that we represent. And if these workers remain standing, our country remains standing in the face of COVID-19. If these workers begin to fall and falter, then we have a situation in Grenada that would be dire. As of now, we know that the situation is managed, even as we look at the numbers going up. We are all mindful, even more so, of our protocols. We know that even persons who are vaccinated must adhere to protocols, social distancing, sanitizing, and all of that. We might have heard different sorts of postulations in July, August, even by Ministry of Health officials. And let me correct that. Even by government officials, not Ministry of Health officials. God love them. We might have heard things like, well, get vaccinated. And it's okay. Get vaccinated. If you want to go out, if you want to be a part of the VIP fetters, if you want to be able to party, get vaccinated. But we all know that even if you are vaccinated, you can contract COVID, you can pass it on. And you may quietly have it and not even know. So even myself, as a fully vaccinated person, I don't take chances unnecessarily. I follow my protocols. I use my mask. I tend not to get into any huge clusters of persons. And that's even before we had a breakout of COVID cases in Grenada. And so we know definitely that the authorities are mindful that they have to engage with the union in this process.
Speaking of vaccination, does the union have a stance on vaccination?
We do have a stance on vaccination. Sometime during the month of July, we did put out an official release statement to that effect, that we do not support mandatory vaccination. In fact, what we said was that we are against mandatory vaccination. And we stand by that. And there are many elements out there who would have said, well, the unions should be the one pushing for vaccination, for mandatory vaccination. We can push for vaccination. But we as a union, fundamentally, the principles on which we are founded and on which we are guided, there is no way that we can begin to say in any situation it is right and just to force onto people something that they may not be necessarily ready to accept. What we can do, have done, and is doing is we have provided educational sessions to our members. Many of our members, especially in the healthcare sector, come to us and say, what do you think? Should I take it? And we say, okay, you have to look at your risk. You have to look at your level of exposure. You have to look at what your government and your officials have said to you is the way to protect yourself, which is vaccination. And you have to make a personal choice to safeguard your own health and that of your family and that of your colleagues. And so to think strongly about being vaccinated. So that is our position. We support persons who want to be vaccinated. We encourage people to pay attention to the official science, to the official position of the Ministry of Health and administrators, and to follow that directive. But if persons are saying, for whatever reason, I have cancer in my family, for whatever reason, medically, I don't think I'm fit. I've gone to my doctor. My doctor is not willing to write a piece of paper that says at this time this person should not be vaccinated because there is a culture of fear or hands off. I don't want to be the one. And we respect that. We respect those workers who come to us in tears saying, at this time, maybe sometime in the future. Some of our workers said to us, when there is a choice, when I can decide which vaccine I want to take, then I will go and when I can decide that there are more than one vaccines and I can have a choice, maybe I'll decide at that point. Now, there is a choice. We now know that we have Pfizer as well as AstraZeneca. And so persons who have been waiting because you wanted a choice, well, you now have a choice. So now it's a good time to decide to go out there and decide, should I take the AstraZeneca or should I take the Pfizer? And so that is our position, to really encourage, to motivate our members, but we will not support mandatory vaccination. And I just want to speak to a release that was put out last week. I have to find it, by one of our sister organizations in the region, a teachers organization in the region that spoke about their stance against mandatory vaccination and why, and we are fully aligned with that. So when I find that, I'll share it with your audience, Blossom.
Okay, no problem. In the meantime, let's take a break, pay some bills, and then we're going to come back and continue the discussion. We're speaking with Public Relations Officer of the Public Workers Union, Daisy Hazzard. To the point, we'll be right back.
This is a message from the Ministry of Health. If you or a family member suspect that you may have contracted COVID-19 and are displaying symptoms, please immediately self-isolate at home. This means that you must also avoid all contact with other members of your household. Do not visit hospitals or health centers, as this creates the potential for further spread of the virus, and it puts additional persons at risk when you come into contact with them. Your best course of action is to call the COVID-19 hotline at 458-4787 or 538-4787, or contact your nearest health center or medical station. Once your information has been received, health officials will come to you. Help prevent the spread of COVID-19. This has been a message from the Ministry of Health.
This is a plastic bag. From February 1st, these bags are not to be used when shopping for food. So here's what you should do. Refuse plastic. Instead, bring your own reusable shopping bags and say goodbye to plastic. Choose to refuse plastic. Walk with your reusable shopping bags and help protect pure Grenada from plastic pollution. A message from the Ministry of Climate Resilience.
Welcome back to The Point. We're speaking with Public Relations Officer of the Public Workers Union, Daisy Hazzard. I was about to open the line, but something just occurred to me, Ms. Hazzard. As you mentioned, the union would not be forcing or would not be encouraging mandatory vaccinations. That reminded me of a recent interview with a former president of a union that stated if it was up to him, he would encourage mandatory vaccination. Were you privy to that interview? I don't want to call name. He already he's already not my biggest fan. So were you privy to that interview, and what are your thoughts?
Blossom, you have just placed me on a bit of a sticky wicket. I have heard the posturings by the gentleman, a former trade unionist, a veteran trade unionist, someone who for a long time in Grenada, if you said trade union, every single person from the smallest child to the oldest person would have been able to call that name. And as I said on another media platform last week, life brings changes to us. And sometimes our philosophy or the fundamental principles that we believe in, there are times when those may change a little bit. But generally, no. How does someone make it their life's work to stand on a sort of a principle, and then you come at this point in your career or in your life and you say, well, literally you're saying that all these things that I made my life on, my history, my career, perhaps it was wrong. Because for any trade unionist to say that the unions should advocate for and should stand up for mandatory vaccination, that is someone who has shifted so far from any sort of philosophy or principle that they might have held. And it's a bit sad because, again, as I said earlier, as a union, we can encourage. We can encourage persons to exercise their choice to be vaccinated. But once you begin to talk about mandating vaccinations, you are infringing on so many rights of a person that there is no way as a union we can go there. We cannot go there. I can personally say to persons, listen, I'm vaccinated, and I think that perhaps that's what you should do. But as a fundamental principle, we from the trade union movement, we cannot go there. And that is why our representative in the Senate, Brother Lewis, I think it was during the month of June, July, would have brought a motion before the parliament against mandatory vaccination. And again, if we look throughout the region, and I couldn't find that document for some reason, it's elusive this morning, but I was really speaking about the Caribbean Union of Teachers, and that they sent out it was either the Caribbean Union of Teachers or it was CPSA, Caribbean Public Sector Association. One of my colleagues would perhaps correct me. But they put out a release, even in the face of what we're seeing throughout the region. Their statement last week says, we cannot and we will not support mandatory vaccinations, because even as we are confronting the pandemic and the scourge of the COVID-19, it is not a time when we give up workers' rights. It is not a time when we fail to represent workers. If there was ever a time that unions are called upon to stand with their workers and to represent them and support them, it is now. Because the fact that there is COVID and that we are dealing with it does not take away every other right of the worker. We have workers who are presently today working in the COVID-19 unit. Presently, there are 4 patients. These workers have no extra protection. Those are the things we are fighting for. These workers have told us since last year. Some of them volunteered, most of them volunteered to work there. What happens to me if I die? What happens to my children when I have to be there in the unit? Because there were protocols that were followed last year. And again, as a union, we want to find out from the Ministry of Health and the authorities, are these protocols which we put in place last year together with you, are these protocols being followed this year? What happens to our workers when they come to work? What happens when they are finished? And so these workers have asked us to represent them because they are working in the front line. They are soldiers on the front line. And so this is a time when the union really have to stand up and really ensure that rights that have been fought for, that persons have sweat for, that persons have shed their blood for, given their lives for, that those rights are not quietly and secretly eroded and taken away under the guise of COVID. Because we will recover from COVID. There is no doubt about it. Man didn't make this earth. God made this earth. And as sure as there is day to day, we know that there'll be night because that is in the hands of the Maker. And we know that at some point we will come over the hill with COVID. And so, no, we do not agree with that gentleman at all. And we know for sure, given his track record in the years that he spent in the trade union movement, if he was still a trade unionist today, and if he was not sitting on the other side where he is sitting now, that gentleman, as I said it last week, might have been the first person to lie down in front of a vehicle or to block a gate somewhere to say, nobody is going to mandate my workers, to force my workers to take a vaccine that they're not convinced about. We are certain of that. And so the goodly gentleman has the authority, as he is doing, to exercise all that he wants to exercise. And it's a bit unfortunate because even when we sit in our trade union hall to speak and we look back at examples, that name is called all the time. And so it's a bit sad. And sometimes we ask ourselves, is this what I'm going to become? Someone who once was fighting for workers and now I am here just giving up the game? I say no more. I say no more on that issue.
All right, let's go to our viewers and listeners who may have questions for Ms. Hazzard. Landline number 435-2041. WhatsApp number, it's also 435-2041. You can also pose your questions on Facebook and YouTube. We have just about 8 minutes to ask them and have them answered, so let's be as quick as we can. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Blossom.
Morning.
Good morning, Ms. Hazzard. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, actually. And I'm so, thrilled the way you actually come over. Now, regarding that gentleman, Karl Marx said he spoke of the embourgeoisement of the working class. And this is a typical example of what is happening. Where you are concerned, actually, I wish there are more people, not only women like yourself in Grenada. Then we'd have, there would be a good future to look forward to. I'm always very impressed about your deliberations and so forth. Keep it on. I hope it would not change like has happened in the past when we have had examples of people who I actually look forward to, and then they change. Keep it up. We are behind you. All the best.
Thank you very much, caller.
Thank you very much, caller. Some of what the caller said was distorted, but I generally got the sense that thank you, caller, for being in support of our positions. And we're very happy that the way that we articulate in our positions has resonated positively with you and the rest of the public, I dare say. Thank you very much.
Facebook question: why have the unions left it to the courts to determine if pension should be reinstated to workers when the sitting government did not seek a judicial decision to reinstate their pension? Don't the unions realize this is a stalling tactic?
It's a very heavy question, and it brings me to a point that I wanted to stick. We must be mindful and we must be aware that the facility to pay or not to pay does not rest within the union. We can advocate, we can struggle, we can work on behalf of workers, we can come to terms with government, we can even sign agreements. But we know, as we have seen with this administration in 2018, even signed agreements mean nothing when you are working with persons who have no honor. And I've said it before and I'm saying it again this morning, because a person who comes to the table and say, I want to solve this problem, the pension issue, it has gone on too long. My government and our government respects the fact that every person who works in Grenada must retire with a pension and must not be sent home in their senior years to beg. And so we want to fix this problem. And so we signed, union signed, and that signature on behalf of the government, the administration, was worth nothing. It was just worth it was expedient for them at the time to get the support of workers and unions because there was an election and they wanted to be reelected. Now, we had to take that matter to court because, again, I want to remind the caller, in 2018, when unions began to agitate publicly and to take up strike action, protest action to bring the pension away situation to the public, government docked public sector workers' pay. Just as we are seeing today that there seem to have been workers whose pay was docked this month end. because our members who did not receive their 4% increase, as we said in our council deliberations, it seems that once again, government has somehow docked the pay of workers. Because if you had to receive your 4% increase and you didn't receive it, because the government perhaps decided somewhere that you ain't getting it, then they've docked your pay. But again, as I've said earlier, today we are saying perhaps there were errors that government would be willing to fix. But in terms of the pension issue, that matter had to be taken to court because the court is one of the places in our land where we can legally get redress. We cannot go and hold a minister's hand and put a gun over their neck or some other threat in order for them to sign a document. But we have to understand that even when it comes to paying workers or to withholding their pay or to paying the pension, that power lies with the persons that we elect to serve in our parliament. That power lies with our member of parliament. That power does not lie within the union. The person who can hold that pen and fix the situation of the pension and gratuity, of any issue that workers are facing, lies within the administration of the day. That is where we need to ask that question. For now, unions, we are seeking redress in the court because that's an avenue to us. And we pray, God, we know that based on our constitution, there is no way that we cannot win in the court. We will persevere and we will win in the courts. Thank you, caller.
A WhatsApp question. Somebody on WhatsApp says, I would like to hear from Ms. Hazzard what she thinks about the new stimulus package announced, which will be rolled out in a matter of days. Okay. I'm wondering if this person caught me by storm. Stimulus package. So we know that a debushing package was announced, was it 3 weeks ago, of 14 point something million dollars. And we know that when you cut bush on the side of the road, within a matter of days, it goes back. It's a thankless task, debushing. We know that there is nothing sustainable in that. We also heard from the Bus Association and so that they are included in some of this, in the stimulus package that's been talked about. And they have been offered loans. And they have said publicly that at this point, we can barely even manage the buses that we have. What do we want with a new loan? We don't want to buy buses. What we want to be able to do is actually survive. So they are literally working every day looking for a survival wage, just a wage to survive, not a wage to live. And so the stimulus package leaves a lot to be desired. Even from last year, we know that there are so many persons who should have been covered and who should have been positively affected by the stimulus package who did not receive any money at all. There are persons who seem to be fortunate and can get. There are other persons, for whatever reason, cannot get. And so as a union, we are very happy that government has taken the initiative to provide relief to persons who are so very affected, to persons who have not been able to work since last year, to industries and businesses and sectors of the society, the economy that are affected. But again, it is not enough. Too much seem to be going in areas that are not sustainable at all, and in areas where we believe as a society and as a union, perhaps more monies, more stimulus need to be poured into. We're still not seeing that happening. All right, let me see. No calls. Okay, so let me go back to Facebook. Somebody on Facebook asks, were the unions ever properly engaged by the COVID committee to play a better role in combating COVID-19?
What I must say is that at the height of the pandemic last year, actually when it started, as a union, we reached out and we aggressively engaged with Ministry of Health. And so we did have several meetings at that level with Minister of Health, Nicholas Steele. We had meetings with senior administrators, CMO, Dr. McIntosh at the hospital during the course of last year. Again, like I said earlier, we have again reached out in a situation where there is COVID in our society. The cases are mounting every day. And we have not seen any overtures from the ministry, but we know that we have a role to play. And so we have reached out. We have been urgently asking for meetings. And we expect that before the day is over, we will get some positive response.
Let me see. Somebody on, it's time for us to end, but somebody on WhatsApp asks, how will a pensioner know if they are granted their 4%? Is there a formula that public officers can use to determine if they've received their 4%?
Well, I think persons know if they've received the 4% or not. I've not been to the bank, but if you see an increase in what you received from the month before, that's your 4%. What persons can do as well is to check with their various finance departments in the various ministries. The pensioners can also check with Ministry of Finance, who handles theirs, to determine whether or not. But the reflection on your bank statement should show it. That's how persons would know if they have received the 4%. There should be an increase in the salary or in the payment.
All right, still on Facebook. Somebody asks, can you tell us what happened to the deducted salaries? Is it an issue by itself or will it be taken up another time?
As a union, we have to fight our battles one at a time. And as I mentioned this morning, Blossom, and we've been mentioning throughout the 4% struggle, the work of the union is never done. And even while we were fighting the 4%, it was a bit of an irritant because there's so many other things that we have to be doing for workers to really bring redress and justice to workers that the 4% was a bit of an irritant. But definitely the issue of the dock salary, there is a time for everything. The Bible tells us about a time and a season. There is always a good time to go before the administrators, the politicians, to say, you wronged us that time, you are coming to us this time, but you owed us. And so the issue of the dock salaries is sleeping. It's not dead at all. It's just resting a little bit until the time is right to take it up and get back our monies that were unjustly taken away from us.
Closing comments, Ms. Hazzard?
We just want to say that public workers out there, if you did not receive your 4% increases, let us know. Call the union, Secretariat 440-2203. Reach out to any member of your executive, myself or anyone. We do not know and we will not know if you did not receive your 4% increase unless you pass that information on to us. There is no way for us to know. Be mindful as well that the unions do not pay salaries. Who pays salaries is your government, your administration. If you've been affected, go to your parliamentary representative as well and let them know because they are the ones who sit in parliament on your behalf. We also want to say to those workers who have received your long-awaited 4%, spend it well, invest it wisely. We have waited long, we have toiled hard for it. We are very thankful that that government has finally seen it fit to put this matter to rest. We await a similar outcome with our bonds. And in the meantime, as we fight and as we struggle with COVID-19, I'm appealing to all of the public to take very good care of yourselves, follow your protocols. Our workers who are out there on the front lines, we stand with you. We are advocating on your behalf with the authorities. As we know, this is a time when we cannot give up any ground for our workers. This is a time when we have to ensure that the rights and benefits that are due to our workers, that they receive it and that none of it is taken away. We are keeping a keen eye on all the other circumstances that our workers are facing. We have workers at the hospital. I mean, the healthcare sector is always a hotbed. And there are situations that we have been massaging, that we have been trying to resolve quietly, that we have been bringing to the attention of the Ministry of Health. In some instances, the actions that are taken are positive. In some instances, we are not so sure. But where we will exhaust every avenue to bring resolution, to bring solutions for our workers. And when those fail, if we have to come back on to the point, if we have to come in the public domain, if we have to read, if we have to take to the streets in protest, we will do that because we know that even in the face of COVID, this is not the time when we are going to give up any grounds and any rights that our workers enjoyed today that were fought for by trade unionists and persons like George I. Brizan in the past.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hazzard. Always a pleasure hearing from you. And of course, we'll keep in touch as the situation unfolds. Hopefully that 4%, like you said, it was a mistake. And hopefully by tomorrow, the final day of the month, they hopefully will see the 4% salary increase. Fingers crossed.
Thank you so much, Blossom. Thank you so much, listeners and viewers. See you another time.
Have a good day.
All righty.
Public Relations Officer of the Public Workers Union, Daisy Hazzard. We thank her so very much for being our guest this morning. And thank you, viewers and listeners, for tuning in to The Point. Always a pleasure. Always appreciate your listenership and your viewership. That's the end of my time for today. Joseph is up next with Mid-Morning Buzz. Have yourselves a blessed one, and I'll see you tomorrow, God willing.